You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record. Netflix has just released a new true crime documentary series, The Sons of Sam. Directed by Joshua Zeman, Sons of Sam explores investigative journalist Maury Terry's decades-long search for the real story behind the 1977 Summer of Sam killings. Did David Berkowitz act alone, or was he just one player in a satanic cult slaying? I joined William Ramsey on his podcast, William Ramsey Investigates, where we discussed the Netflix series, Maury Terry's book, The Ultimate Evil, as well as the Arliss Perry murder. It's an interesting discussion. Take a listen.
Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest, Roberta Glass. And we both watched with great interest this new documentary that came out on Netflix titled The Sons of Sam, plural. The Sons of Sam, A Descent into Darkness. I was really interested in it as somebody who had followed Maury Terry, had read the book, The Ultimate Evil, and had actually written an article about the death of Arliss Perry, which I will post in the show notes. It was an article I wrote like 5 years ago talking about its tie-ins with Crowley Moss. It happened on October 12th, so Crowley's birthday. So it's something of particular interest to me. So I watched this also documentary to see. I expected it something different. I actually found it to be pretty interesting. So Roberta's going to comment on the documentary as well. So Roberta, are you there?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for agreeing to talking about this. Do you have any first impressions on what you thought about the Sons of Sam and the production and kind of, it was a 4-part series, so.
I was pleasantly surprised. I really expected it to kind of just negate the whole theory, and it was really more about Maury Terry and his obsessive search and how this story really ate him up. And I thought that was an interesting angle. In other ways, I was disappointed. I was waiting the entire time because I had also followed your work in the Arliss Perry story. I had followed Crawford's arrest. I had followed that Crawford had the Ultimate Evil book in his closet. And I thought, oh, well, maybe we'll get some more information about that. And then at the end, it's just, spoiler alert, it's just they show that he had the book and there's no more information. So if you're looking for a reinvestigation of the Son of Sam case, you're going to be disappointed. If you're looking for the Son of Sam did it himself story, you're going to be disappointed. This is really the Maury Terry story. And it's a fascinating story. It's a story of an obsessive. And of course, you know, I can relate a little bit.
I can too. I definitely can relate. I mean, he was kind of an interesting guy. I was surprised that they were going to take that angle, like you said, that they were going to talk about Maury Terry. And I mean, I don't know. Were you on that Facebook group that was Maury Terry's group? Because there was a lot of activity, and apparently a lot of activity now. But I was on there with Ed Opperman and Denaro, who was in the documentary. So I had spoken to Carl Denaro online. So it was interesting to see Denaro on the TV show. But were you aware of that group, the Maury Terry group?
I was aware. I read The Ultimate Evil. I still don't know what to think of it. You know, it's very hard because Berkowitz never had a trial. And in this series, every time someone who supports like Borelli or Kofi comes up, who supports the Berkowitz did it himself theory, they just say, no, Terry's wrong. And then it ends there. The clip ends there. Right. So I get very frustrated. They let them present their case just a little bit. Why? Why do you think that? And when they go to the main reason it has to be more than one shooter is because of the 2.5 minute difference. That's a very slight difference of when the crime was committed and when Berkowitz took the ticket off his car. And I know I'm going to disappoint your listeners, I think, a little bit. You know, I haven't made up my mind. I'd like to hear more. I'd like more of a discussion about the case itself.
Right. Well, I think that there was more. I mean, all those people were killed at night, but they had multiple different crime sketches of what people look like, right? None of which really looked like Berkowitz. Maybe one did. Mm-hmm. And so it looks like there was other people. I think Carl Denaro says that some woman was the person who pulled the trigger on him. So I think that was one of the primary bases of why people believe that more than people did it. Almost everybody who's interviewed in that film, other than the police or the authorities, said other people were involved. So
Yeah.
it seemed other than really Berkowitz. And they kind of didn't really focus on a lot of the Berkowitz interviews where he's talking about the process church. There's a lot of footage out there of him talking about being afraid of these other people. And so
it's very hard because you have Berkowitz, who I think is the most unusual mass murderer. He hasn't tried to get out. What I understand is he's refused parole. He understands that he's in there for life. He's apologized. I mean, those things are very rare.
yes.
So it makes you want to trust him. But then again, this is also a killer. So, you have to be careful. There's a lot of sort of Monday morning quarterbacking with the police. If you're the police, the stressful thing, you think you solved the crime. Do you really want to go back and, open it up again,
No.
relive it? And also just, I don't know. And also with the different sketches, you also have that in the Zodiac Killer. But that, you're right, that is the best evidence out there are the sketches. And they're so different for the multiple shooting.
It's a much easier, much more palatable story to just say one guy did it for everybody. It's not even just for the police. It's also for the media as well, right? We got him. Berkowitz is it. There's no additional deaths. It's over. And we can just put the bookend on it. And it's much more disturbing and troubling to say that there was some kind of group deliberately causing terror in New York City in 1975 and 1976.
Well, that's been a theme of our conversations, whether we're talking about Epstein or think about a story like Madoff where just a few people go down. That all these people just sort of do it alone, nothing more to, even in the Nexium story.
Ranieri, right? That came to mind as well. Yeah.
Right. It really could have been so many more people could have been implicated in that. And that could have gone so much further. Maxwell, Epstein. I mean, it's a very American thing. Oswald,
right.
One messed up person did it. That's it. Nothing more,
Right.
So.
I mean, but for me, I think was interesting in that documentary was that they went to Minot. They went to Minot, North Dakota,
Mm-hmm.
and had interviews with the cops there who were kind of validating the stories coming out of New York and talking about one of these kids, the Carr brothers, literally sacrificing a dog and drinking its blood. I was like, wow, you actually put that into the documentary. That's pretty intense.
Yeah, it was very interesting that they said, oh, well, the New York authorities, police looked at us like we were hicks. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Like they don't know anything.
Yeah, they were pretty well spoken. I thought those two police that they featured in there.
Absolutely. And the way that Carr killed himself before he was apprehended was so close to the way Crawford did it.
Yeah.
With the Arliss Perry thing. It was just shocking.
Shocking, yeah.
Just to watch it. And it's interesting also, I was struck by, I think I listened to Zeman, the director's, he's recorded a new introduction to Maury Terry's book.
Oh, interesting.
And it's interesting because it's very poo-pooing the idea of Satanism. It brings up satanic panic and that Satanism is just mostly kids trying to freak out their parents and that real evil lives in us and that Satanism is sort of a skeptical world outlook. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I was thinking to myself, well, this seems like kind of like a Hollywood guy. And of course, someone like Maury Terry, who's so moralistic and obsessive, is going to look like some kind of strange, obsessive, destructive person to him. This guy is, makes this very slick, very well done, very slick, very palpable take. But to sort of like a Hollywood guy, Maury Terry must look like a nut.
Right, and I think that's an easy way to look at him, as this kind of singular person fighting against the darkness. But the book is pretty well researched. But I think Zeman, I mean, if you look at the documentary and his public statements, they seem to be different because the way his documentary lays out and what he allows to be put in there is that all these other people are saying somebody else did it, somebody else was involved, right? And they add not Borelli, but the other Italian prosecutor, whose name I can't remember right now, was bringing up a new case saying that there's others involved, right? Do you remember that part?
Right, yeah. The DA, the Queen's DA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was it Salerno or something like that? But so there was other people within the authorities who were not just taking this, we got the killer approach.
Yeah, and I thought also there was an interesting part that Maury Terry seemed to work best when he had someone who was skeptical of his work working with him. And when he kind of lost that pushback, like when he gets to the Roy Radin murder, he finds that Bible and it's open.
Right.
And that's the ultimate evidence, this Bible that's left next to the body. And it turns out he was wrong. You can see his work is very much matches up with the Carr brothers. And then it starts to kind of expand and get a little bit messier and a little vaguer as it goes on.
I would agree. I just thought that there was definitely nothing real after he put out The Ultimate Evil. It didn't seem like there were that many other pieces that were included into that puzzle until the guy who killed himself in San Jose. So, it seems like he didn't really add on to his original story, but he was in Untermeyer Park. They saw those videos of him. So he was looking around. Untermeyer Park is super occult. I don't know if people keyed in. Probably not even Dan or Joshua Zeman, the director, did, but those two pillars with the Sphinx is straight out of Eliphas Levi, which is the symbol to know, to will, to dare, and to remain silent.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that Levi, black magic sigil or whatever that was written in the letter, and also supposedly that was being redrawn by one of the Carr brothers. So there's definitely some occult markers there for sure.
I was very interested in your reaction to that kind of narrative that Satanism is sort of a benign, skeptical outlook.
I have the direct opposite. I've done so much research into Crowley and some of these other Satanists that it's the opposite. I think that satanic panic is actually a concept that's promoted by a lot of occultists to discredit research into, what's going on. A lot of those people who originally proffered that concept, at least today, maybe not back in the past, but, overlooked a lot of the real stuff that was really happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a concept was, distributed around. But I think that there's so many satanic crimes and things that are happening, particularly today, that it's hard to believe that anybody would have that kind of loaded term, kind of like a conspiracy theorist or something like that, when the facts tell a different story. I have to write a book called Occult Crimes because there's so many occult influenced crimes. Richard Ramirez was a member of the Church of Satan. His whole ideology and outlook was based upon his satanic principles. He murdered tons of people, known and unknown, right? 11 or 12. So that's just one of many. You can talk about the Kilroy killing in Matamoros, where the guy was literally brutalized in a satanic ritual. So you can go through this long list. You can talk about, the basis of the True Detective show was this church outside of
Hosanna Church, yeah.
In Louisiana, yeah. The Hosanna Church, where they're doing satanic rituals. So it does happen. It's just not believable. I've done tons of research into the Process Church. I wrote about number 3 in the Process Church in my book, Children of the Beast. And it was very complex, very secretive, organized, almost like an SS or Jesuits or something like that. Very complex internal mechanics of that cult. And to say that that's not real is ridiculous when all the evidence exists that these guys, Process Church of the Final Judgment, was around till now. And there's a lot of apologists for them. I think Ed's actually interviewed one. Ed Opperman, guy, did a very fawning documentary about the Process Church. It really didn't go into the details.
I guess my question for you is, why do you think it just seems very rational to say, well, I don't believe Satanism. You know what I mean? I'm not panicked by Satanism, but there are people who believe it and practice it, and sometimes it is involved in these murders. Why do you think it's such a winning strategy to say, oh no, it's just all panic and it's all just to sort of titillate America and kind of get money?
Like I said, I think some of the originators are people who are actually in Satanism, so that's their cover, and then other people believe that story, so it's disseminated. But a lot of people just don't have the basic facts. I think that you talked to a lot of people about satanic motivated crimes or things like that, and they just don't know how many cultists there really are. But yeah, I think it's much easier to have that position, like, oh, it's not happening, than actually doing your research and actually looking at West Memphis 3 is a perfect example. You can look at the West Memphis 3 and say, hey, you guys are part of satanic panic. But if you look at what these guys are up to based on testimony of different people, killing dogs, a lot like Son of Sam, killing dogs out in remote places. And Miss Kelly said they were drinking blood. So, the facts tell a different story. I don't think it's very common, but in rare circumstances, these people are doing crazy occult influenced stuff.
Well, there's one turd dropped into the middle of this documentary where they're talking about the NYPD being corrupt and forcing confessions. And then they bring out the Central Park 5. Right in the middle. And I thought they were going to bring in the West Memphis 3 when they started talking about satanic panic. I go, oh, wow, this documentarian is not a researcher. This guy is a filmmaker. He's not a researcher, because had he done one tiny bit an hour of research into the Central Park Five, boy, he would know he's promoting a falsehood there. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting moment. I was just glad they didn't bring in the West Memphis Three to prove satanic panic. And they also make the argument in this that Maury Terry should have never gone on these talk shows to promote his book.
No, that was interesting. Maybe that's the only outlet back at that time, right? So if you really have a story, where else are you going to go other than Geraldo Rivera or something like that? Yeah, it's unfortunate. He was on, Maury Terry was, one thing that made me sit up in my chair was he was on a talk show with former FBI op guy, Ted Gunderson. And if you know his backstory, that's very interesting as well. He was involved in McMartin. And some people think that Gunderson was kind of like a counter intel officer in McMartin, like screwing up things. And he was sleeping with one of the women, apparently.
Yeah. And very much in touch with the satanic guy in the military, Colonel Aquino, according to Opperman and a couple other.
Yeah, I think Opperman said that the Gunderson would be on the phone with Aquino, like on a friendly basis. So these guys are up to no good. And now you want to talk about Aquino? It gets deeper and deeper. So the reality of the satanic ideas exists. You can just look at the Church of Satan, the Church of Set, all that stuff. These people, I think, like the outsiders to think that they're just play acting. And I think that's part of that's camouflage.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting with the Roy Radin murder. They were like, he was wrong about the cult being involved. And now I'm forgetting his name, the producer of The Godfather, Robert Evans. He was involved with, the prostitute, the prostitute woman who went down in California. He was trying to get underage prostitutes from her.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. No, it's Heidi Fleiss.
Heidi Fleiss. Thank you. I forgot her name. Heidi Fleiss. There's tapes of him talking to Heidi Fleiss, talking about the underage prostitute that she sent him and kind of like talking about her. And, it sounded like a regular thing that he was getting girls from her. And he was also involved with cocaine. Robert Evans got busted for cocaine. And those are all the things that the cult was involved with. Kind of interesting. So maybe there is more. I don't know. That was my thought.
No, I'd agree with that.
Maybe there is more to the Roy Radin thing.
More to the story. There's networks, right?
Right.
So, yeah. The Process Church is always seen with those dogs, right? They're always seen with those German Shepherds. So there was this kind of like dog similarity between what they called the 22 Children of Hell and Process Church.
Did they ever solve the Plaxman murder?
Not to my knowledge.
No?
I don't know. Another weird thing about the Arliss Perry story was I was followed on Facebook by this guy, Brian McCracken. He was like the last witness in the Arliss Perry murder. And Ed Opperman interviewed him in 2018.
I heard that interview. Yeah.
So these kind of things are still percolating around in the U.S. But going back to the documentary, I thought it was really well made, and I was surprised that they actually talked so much about alternate or additional suspects.
Well, they talk about this being Maury Terry's white whale, this story.
Right.
Is the message from this documentary not to go too deeply into research, to stay on the surface? I don't know. That was my other question.
It's a good one. I mean, this is, there's a cautionary tale there. Like, it doesn't seem like Maury Terry had other output. Like, this became his story and that was it. So I think that's an unfortunate element of his life. Like, why isn't he writing another additional book, maybe of something on the side to this story? Or he just had Ultimate Evil, to my knowledge, is all he put out.
Sometimes, people have one story to tell, and that's their thing. But you look at the way his marriage started out, with their first date being going to the Son of Sam murder scenes, and that his wife being kind of like a assistant or a researcher. So it didn't really start out as a normal kind of marriage relationship to begin with. So I thought that was a fatal flaw in the story there. He started out this is an obsessive guy. This is not going to be Joe family man, Joe light guy going on, and maybe more like a Joe McGinnis or an Ann Rule, or someone who's going to go from case to case to case. This is someone who's always going to keep turning over rocks. And also the other thing that they did some heavy criticism of him for was his interview, especially his second interview with Berkowitz.
Right.
Have you seen that interview, and did you think that was fair?
They really criticized him. I think he was just asking pointed questions. They seemed to think that he characterized him as being overly aggressive, right? I didn't get that impression. I felt like that was a little misguided or misaligned. What did you think?
Well, I thought, well, that's so easy if you're not having to do it yourself. You spend decades, I don't know if it's decades, but at least 1 decade researching this. You finally get to a second audience with Berkowitz, and you get the opportunity to ask him everything you want to ask him. And of course, you're going to want to push a little bit. Of course, you're going to be on the edge of your seat. Of course, you're going to verify your research. Should he have laid back a little? Was his approach too heavy? Is he a professional on-camera guy? No. It's always so easy when you're not the one doing it.
Agreed.
And that was kind of my thought through the whole thing. Whether you're a cop or whether you're an interviewer, it's always so easy if you don't have to do it yourself to judge someone else's work or whatever.
For me, Berkowitz is clearly trying to keep quiet. He's mentioned Process Church in interviews. But he's talked about his dad. He's worried about other people. He thinks he's afraid because there's other sons out there. I think, from my impression, is Berkowitz knows a lot more. He just doesn't want to talk. There's a certain point where he doesn't want to talk about stuff.
And certainly the prison informant aligns with Berkowitz's story. And the other person who was initiated, he says he was initiated into the occult children group around the same time as Berkowitz, seems to back up his story. But there's an issue here where, my understanding of the occult is that silence is really one of the premier values of it.
Yes.
Loyalty to the cult and staying silent. So that's an issue, right?
Yeah, lots an issue. A lot of cults to have, like, you're in, and there's no out. You bleed in, you bleed out, kind of like the mob. So, that may have been why these Carr brothers died, or one of the other Carr brother got driven off the road, right, supposedly, in NYC. So there's these cover-ups that happen. And it gets pretty dark. If you get initiated and brought into these heavy-duty cults like the Process Church, I don't think there's a way you get out. You just kind of have to run for your life. I don't know.
How many do you think that group still exists today?
In a different form. I don't think it's real. I think both of the two heads, Dick Grimston, his name was Moore, and his wife passed away. She started Best Friend's Dog.
Animal Sanctuary,
right, in Utah. So that might have some kind of internal connection to the process. But like I said, and even number 3 passed away. His name was Timothy Wiley. He just passed away in the last couple of years. But the remnants are there. A lot of the writing is there. So whether they're carrying on that same tradition, I don't know.
Do you think that this story will ever be solved? Really solved in any satisfying way?
Well, it's just like you said, silence, right? Silence is golden. So I would say that a lot of these people aren't talking about how important, how networked it was. And if there really are 22 sons, children of Sam, right, then there's a lot of other people walking around who are in that cult. So I don't think the totality will ever be solved. But I do think it's fascinating that, that Arliss Perry case at least was somewhat cracked, at least by the security guard. I don't know who else he was involved in, or whether he was the only. That's another kind of Berkowitz thing. You're saying that he was the only one involved in her death? How did she get lured to the church in Stanford? There's a lot of questions there. Late at night. What woman goes to church late at night to supposedly pray? I don't know. I don't believe that.
You think she was part of Berkowitz says she was hunted?
Right. She was hunted, but if you remember in the Ultimate Evil, she had the connection to Mino, right? So she was connected to North Dakota, and supposedly she was an ardent Christian, and she may have tried to evangelize to some of these other people, and they didn't like it. And so that was why she might have been targeted. That's really what set Maury Terry off on, that thing is what Berkowitz wrote about in the book. I think he wrote something on the, fringes of a book, and that set Maury Terry, and that's how the Ultimate Evil starts, is her death.
Let's just be very skeptical for a second. What would be the benefit to Berkowitz if he's not trying to get out? I have a theory, but what would be the benefit to him to say that he was part of this satanic cult, to make all this up?
I don't know.
If he's not trying to get out on parole.
Right, so he's not trying to minimize himself or anything. I don't know. What do you think the benefit would be?
Well, it backs up. In 1987, he's had a religious conversion. It furthers his story that, his story is a story that basically he was possessed by demons. So it's like, I don't integrate with the evil inside of myself. I'm just speculating. I don't sort of integrate that side. So it's just these outside forces coming in on me, taking me over. My real self is really good, and, you know, a better presentation. I would think that would be a better presentation, and it also hopefully would move more people to Christianity. That was the only thing I could think of. However, I don't see the benefit of adding all these details about the Carr brothers in the Breslin letter. I don't see what that would do. I don't know why you would do. I guess, maybe was he plotting a defense? But then he pled guilty and basically fell on his sword.
Right.
The thing that shocked me the most, which I don't know if I'd forgotten about it or I'd never known, was that he screamed, "Stacy is a whore," and the thing, "I do it again." So, like, whoa.
He had like a Manson moment. Yeah.
Boy, is that a different Berkowitz you don't see now. Biting people.
Yeah, it sounds like he spazzed out there. And he had that weird smile on his face. It reminded me of Ricky Casso. Do you know of the Ricky Casso story?
Yes.
He was in occult crime, and he had that weird kind of, even under arrest, he had that weird glint in his eye, like didn't show any remorseful, didn't keep his head down or something like that. Just like, yeah, smiling. Weird. I mean, very strange response there.
Very strange. I mean, all the footage is so great. And even like the little details of 70s New York where the cop says Berkowitz is 5 feet, 7 inches tall to his head.
Right.
Like his bouffant 70s hair gives him an extra. There's all sorts of great little details, but it's very scary to see that the crime and the grit living in New York like that, because that's what we're headed to. Murders are up 97% here. I mean, that's what we're going back into, is that kind of thing where the police are totally overwhelmed. They can't keep up. The violent crime is out of control. That's where we're headed.
Yeah. Well, hopefully another Son of Sam will not pop up. One of the other additional things, I mean, you want to talk about cults, but did you recognize who was the narrator on there? On Sons of Sam?
Paul Giamatti.
Skull and Bones. It's a Skull and Bones member. Right. So why are they asking a Skull and Bones member to narrate that? I mean, so bizarre.
Great voice, though.
He's a good actor. He's a good actor.
Yeah.
I mean, but he's got an interesting heritage.
A few people who follow the occult or follow conspiracies have said, is this a cover-up? Is this documentary a cover-up, a sort of whitewash?
Well, I've heard that there's a lot of talk on Facebook, on the more official Maury Terry site. So people are chatting. And somebody actually sent me something from Joshua Zeman, the director's on there, on the Maury Terry site, like talking. And so some people are saying they're covering, he was part of a cover-up, that he didn't go too deep enough. From my perspective, I was just happy that he even mentioned that, that he mentioned that there were other. I think that's really the gist of the original of this Sons of Sam, is to say that there's other people involved or could potentially be involved. That was the differentiation from maybe the standard Son of Sam story. So, but it seems like there's definitely some consternation. Have you heard of anything?
No, I just, I heard, my friend told me about an interview he did where he was comparing the wilding going on in Unterrider Park with the wilding in the Central Park 5 case. And I thought that was a dim comparison.
There's a comparison there? Really? It's a non sequitur.
The wilding is what the Central Park 5 themselves said they were doing. So that case has been so rewritten, it's just unreal. So what are you going to do?
It really has. I talked to the main guy on that, where Eric Reynolds. Somebody, if you're bored and want to get right from the arresting officer, you can look it up on my podcast and see what he said. Also, Siragusa was his name, who also was the lawyer for the main perp, who was from, I think, Puerto Rico, and had a really sketchy background, and was involved in a bunch of other rapes and stuff like that. So they're all there on my podcast.
You mean Mateo Reyes?
Mateo Reyes.
That was I can't pronounce his name, but he was his lawyer who got punched out by Reyes after he gave him a pack of M&Ms at his hearing.
I got called a racist a few times after that one. You're not supposed to question the Central Park 5
No,
myth.
It's a myth. And what do you think the value of these myths are? I mean, what's the value of Son of Sam did it alone, Central Park 5, or it's all the police's fault?
I think it's a political axe to grind of Central Park 5 that, the man came down on 5 people that when they see us because we're black, that's why we got busted. That's the intimation. And I think the same thing with Son of Sam. It's like, there aren't any groups of people doing strange stuff at night. There's just one lone lunatic who talks to a dog, It's a much easier gift to wrap than saying this guy was part of a much broader cultural event of cult activity. I'm pretty sure that DeGrimston lived in New York City at that time, too. So like the founder of the Process Church.
That's interesting. I mean, that's sort of like the nothing to see here myth.
Yeah.
Everything's cool. Don't get upset. Don't get hysterical. All these other people are hysterical and crazy, who are saying that this is going on.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because if you call Satanism a kind of skeptical outlook, that falls right in line with that, right? That, there's evil doesn't really exist. That's a Christian concept, right?
I agree. But, there's interesting parallels between the Son of Sam and the Zodiac Killer and the Beast of Florence. Those kind of somebody groups predating on, lovers' lanes. People who are out, couples alone. Very strange. Strange tie-ins with that. And what is it? Don't Fear the Reaper. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard that song?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Romeo and Juliet. I think they're singing about like lovers being killed and stuff. Interesting.
There's been a new development in the West Memphis 3 case. Can we talk about that for a second?
I don't know. Is there, I think the mother of Damien Eccles passed away, that one?
No. This is what Damien Eccles is saying, and you can never trust anything he's saying. He's heard that the DNA evidence has been lost, and now he's demanding that it be retested. He says lost or destroyed. But they still haven't turned over the DNA from 2011, their results. They tested that, never turned it over, pled guilty instead. And so now he's announcing on his Twitter that it's a big cover-up and they have to retest these DNA because it will exonerate him. How convenient, right?
It will exonerate? I thought he was already exonerated, right?
Right. Why is he still trying?
That's what the Court of Public Opinion says. It must be true. No, I wasn't aware of that. Somebody did send me something that said his mom passed away. So.
That's true too. Yeah, but thought that was pretty funny that he's out there. Now he wants it tested. Now that he knows it can't be found, or he thinks it can't be found.
So how convenient.
Be careful, Damien Eccles. You might get what you wish for. It might not turn out so well.
Yeah, is there anything else you'd like to add? I gotta go off and get ready for my next interview.
No. I mean, would you recommend this? I think it's worth people's time, right?
Yes, it was worth the 4 hours for sure. Just to relive that. I think that there was a lot of interesting additions, film, visuals that I had not seen before. All that things that happened in Minot, that they actually traced that, and that there were local, newscasters reporting on these crimes. And also the end, I forgot his name now, but the guy who was, associated with the death of Arliss Perry. That whole sequence at the end was pretty scary that they actually were there. And it was
Crawford?
Yeah, Crawford.
Very scary, very scary. It was very well crafted documentary, very slick and easy to watch.
I think so.
I'm really happy to talk with you about it because this is really your area of expertise is the occult.
Well, a little bit more, I just did another interview about this guy who supposedly, somebody thinks that, the thing is that you can put anything out and somebody will claim that you're a shill, right? So somebody's claiming my last guy's a shill. I don't know who talked about the Son of Sam case. But I guess you have to kind of just look at it yourself.
That's very frustrating about the conspiracy community, this sort of atmosphere of paranoia of everybody calling each other shills and CIA, find it very disconcerting.
I've gotten so many emails about me being a shill at this point.
If you're a shill, you're not getting paid very well, William Ramsey.
I'm not getting paid enough, damn it, for being a shill. That's no doubt about it. Please.
I've been called a shill, too. I'm being paid by the prosecutors, too. Where are my checks? I don't know. Yeah. I'm still waiting.
If you figure out where you're getting, if you get a check, let me know, because I'm ready to get my check as well.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise, a pleasure. Always great to talk with you again. It's Roberta Glass of the True Crime Report. Go check it out on YouTube or iTunes, and a lot of great stuff. That interview you did with the guy about innocence fraud was fantastic. It was the Amazing Atheist.
Yeah, Devin Tracy, Atheism is Unstoppable. It's uncensored.
Yeah, Atheism is Unstoppable. Yeah, that was fantastic. So people go check that out. Again, Roberta Glass, thanks so much.
Thank you.